Sexual alchemy is a very hot topic, and there seems to be various opinions and interpretations of what it means. We have the traditional look, the traditional lens to understand what sexual alchemy is, and then we have more of the modern school of thoughts about it. So, today I'm going to be talking about sexual alchemy from a more generalized perspective on how you can create it and how you can get the benefits from it outside of dogmatic or traditional paths. Okay, so if you're new here, welcome. My name is Silvana, and this is the Venusian Academy, a space for Tantra and the feminine arts. So, one of the most interesting things that I found whenever I started dabbing into the research of this stuff is the real meaning of the word sex. Because whenever you explore the word and the meaning and you see where it comes from and you kind of like start diving into this rabbit hole, you realize, you will think, right, naturally, that sex means union. But in reality, it means separation. So this is where it gets interesting because we have the union between, a male polarity, masculine polarity, and a feminine polarity. And that's what we traditionally consider sex. But it looks like an union, yet its meaning, its true meaning is a separation. So what is this separation that is happening from? Even in more modern perspectives, and whenever we also look at different languages, there's an association between sex and death. And in Jungian psychology, there was a deep study of that, of sexuality being closer to the death impulse than the survival impulse. Because true sexuality does demand a sort of death, a death of a part of the self, a death of the ego to be able to surrender in that way. I'm saying true sexuality because, we have our animal parts, and then we have our human parts, and then we have our spiritual parts, and the totality of these three centers, that's what it forms like the modern day human being. And some people, they live more in one center than the other, but in the tantric path, tantra meaning weaving together, we're trying to unite our self with ourselves. We're trying to unite our consciousness with everything that we are. So this correlation between sexuality and death gives us so much, there's so much symbolism in that. Because if we want to achieve true sexuality, which is the surrender into another person to be able to experience the totality of it, which is the union between the animal, emotional, and spiritual aspects of ourselves, it does require that a part of you dies, and it's usually a part of the ego, and it comes from both partners, right? It's an act of surrender. So we go back to this exploration of sex is separation, right? And the act itself, the culmination, is closely associated psychologically to the death impulse versus the survival impulse. And then we understand that sex alchemy is a process of separation in order for us to experience union. Consciously using sexuality as a form of uniting closer to ourselves is what sexual alchemy is about. It is a way of reclaiming more union within ourselves. And the sexual act, because it's separating us from a part of ourself, right? It's separating us in the act from this part that we sacrifice into the sexual act, that it's usually an egoic part. That is the fuel that allows me to, if I leave something behind, if I separate from something, I create that separation. And then I'm in this raw state of openness. What do I choose to unite with? And this is the mechanics and the energetics of sexual alchemy, because usually modern sexual alchemy is used for manifestation, and it's used for, bringing in things into our reality, for moving sexual energy through our body, like directing it into our organs or directing it into desires, dreams, fueling realities, playing with this part of ourselves that is godlike, that co-creates with spirit, with life itself. So what is important to understand here is like whenever we bring our consciousness into the act and we want to practice sexual alchemy, we have to keep in mind what is the part of ourselves that we want to separate from in order to unite deeper with our truest self. Our truest self is the self that it's not separated. And I know that there's a lot of contradiction in these conversations. And Tantra is a conversation of contradictions because it's the weaving together of polarities that seem separate, that were never separate to begin with, yet we get the experience of the separation of these polarities. So it's like we honor the illusion that we experience by seeing its absolute truth in its form and it's in what it's showing us. And then we also honor the transcendental truth that the idea and concept of separation is an illusion and it's a spell that we are all under. So this is why this conversation has so much contradiction. So I'm saying that it's important to understand what is a part of ourselves that we want to separate from in order to unite with ourselves. That's what we live, what we sacrifice in the sexual act. And right now, this is very theoretical. I'm going to give you a pretty spot on example to kind of bring it all together. But before I do want to offer a warning. And it's a warning because, we are a very traumatized species. And if, and because of our childhood traumas or developmental traumas that we experience, whenever we don't seek to find that wholeness within ourselves before we step into the playfulness and also the power of sexual alchemy and engaging in magic using our sexuality, we run the risk of losing ourselves because if we're still trying to find wholeness in another person and trying to find, perceive the other as like the answer to all of the holes or things that are within me that I don't want to deal with, we're stepping into dangerous territory. And I say dangerous because it's not dangerous, it's just, you're just gonna have to learn that the hard way, right? So it's like, okay, step by step, right? We have to learn foundational stuff. Foundational stuff is finding wholeness within. It's realizing that nothing outside of me can complete me. That I am in experience of, I'm in an inner journey with myself where what I'm really looking for is to find that union within me. Once we establish that foundation and then we want to begin opening up our sexual centers and practicing in sexual alchemy, then we understand that we are trying to unite with the truest part of ourselves. And my partner in the sexual act is this symbol that I am giving a part of myself to offering it in the cauldron of sexuality so that I can drive closer to myself. So even though in sexuality we are so deeply, intimately, physically and emotionally and spiritually connected with the other person, what's really happening is that the person is almost like holding the polarity on the physical plane so that we can leave behind certain parts of ourselves that are not part of our truest self and allows us to unite with our spirit, with what we truly are. It's almost like we are in the game of Shakti, and then in that boom, we go back to our consciousness, to our Shiva, to our inner Shiva, which is our inner consciousness. So there is a lot of power in sexual energy, and that's why it's, there's a lot of, like, if you read any traditional tantric books, written from I've dived more into the different cults of Tantra in India. There's a lot of stuff of like, do not do this without a guru, do not do this if you don't have a teacher, and there is so much wisdom in that. However, I do have a very unorthodox, unconventional approach to this because our psychology for us Western people is very different, which means that we need different things, which means that we approach life a little bit differently. And I'm more on the left-hand path type of person where I do not wish to take on a guru or a teacher. I like to have many teachers and use my yoni, my energetic center, and my connection to divinity, direct connection, as the guide and the teacher. So everything I'm saying comes from this perspective of more of a wild west type of interaction with sexual energy. It also comes with its warnings, right? It's like if you don't have that guidance, you almost have to take full responsibility for what you're doing. And that's why this path, especially whenever you step into Tantra, from a Western perspective, modern Tantra perspective, you cannot still be dealing with fears of like, I need somebody to take care of me. It does demand that you really become responsible for your own spiritual, emotional well-being. So this is a path for somebody that has done enough shadow work to be able to feel comfortable diving into these realms. Even though sexual alchemy and sexuality is happening with another person, whenever we're engaging in the actual consummation act, this is a solo journey. And that's the irony of it. And this is one of the most important things about sexual alchemy. And I think it's not really spoken about a lot because it's such a little nuance, but it's everything. It's what turns just intense physical sexuality into actual sexual alchemy that begins creating transformation in both persons' life in a way that is conducive to them getting closer to their truest selves. It leads you into a path of more alignment and harmony, right? Alignment and harmony, because this harmony is this separation energy. Harmony is the union energy of like, okay, I am walking my path. Not the path that somebody told me to walk, but my path. So the irony, the contradiction is that sexual alchemy is a solo journey. And it's a solo journey of turning your own sexual energy into an offering to the divine, to your death and to your life. So practical example, so we can kind of ground all of these concepts into something that we can all understand. Let's say that you are in a moment of intimacy and there is, you let yourself go, meaning that you have surrendered and you are feeling love and passion and sexuality. And there's this like just deeply like union of you with all of life and with this person. And you're in this like energy of bliss and love. In that moment, when you bring your awareness into your sexual energy, into what is happening within you, it starts with the body. That's like the first gateway. Feeling into your body, and then you realize there's an energy animating the body, and there's an energy that's moving between the two individuals, and it's just going like a battery. When you grab this energy and all the love that you feel in that moment and that you have for this person and for the experience you're having, and you give all this life to death by in that moment bringing in this consciousness of like, I surrender all this energy to life itself, to death itself, knowing that it will end because everything will end eventually, knowing that it's like a part of, I just opened up, and in that opened up, we're in the energy of eternity. And whenever I bring this energy of like finite separation into eternity, and I give this person to the energy of death, kalima, right? The like time, the concept of time. I am separating myself from that physical moment, and it is in that moment that you kind of feel so much that you give it up, that you are separating yourself from the temporary parts of yourself. And in that energy, that's where you're able to connect with your divinity. This is where sexual alchemy happens. And this is the moment in which you're like, consciousness, where do I direct all this energy? I sacrifice this moment to the game of life and death, because everything ends. Even though I am feeling eternity and bliss, where do I want to direct all of this energy that is available to me right now? What is the reality that I want to experience as a temporary being, as a soul having a human experience? And this is how you can practice sexual alchemy. One of the many ways. There are many rituals, there are many philosophies, like I said at the beginning. There are many paths to roam. You just have to find the one that suits you best. And if you want to get a taste of this, I recommend that you start familiarizing yourself with the concepts of death. I do have a video called the Death Meditation. It's not an actual meditation, I just explain a meditation where you can contemplate death, because death, sexuality, intimacy, and Tantra, they all fall under the same category. These are all doors towards the eternity of ourselves, and the irony, right? But these are the energies that we have to familiarize ourselves with whenever we are on this path of looking to understand our sexual energy and create sexual alchemy. I almost forgot. Check out the description box below. I have a link to sign up for the Venusian Academy for free. I have some classes inside there, and there is a series, and there are some workshops that I've guided, and it's completely free to join. And if you are looking for learning more about this westernized Tantra, I also have a mentorship program, and it is open right now. So check it out in the description box below. And now I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.